If you're configuring SAP BTP or sitting in an architecture interview, you've probably faced this question. What is the difference between IAS, IPS, and Microsoft Entra ID? It's a common point of confusion because setting up all three distinct tools requires a heavier lift up front. But that initial effort is the direct trade-off for long-term automation. To see why you actually need all three, picture a company with 5,000 employees. They rely on a heavy mix of Microsoft and SAP ecosystems to get their work done. Look at this network map. A single employee in the center is constantly branching out to different tools: S/4HANA, the BTP Cockpit, SuccessFactors, Teams, and Outlook. That web of connections creates three massive operational headaches: how do users log in, who creates accounts, and when an employee leaves, who revokes access. Without a unified system, every single application node becomes an isolated question mark. Who handles it? Operating this way creates constant IT friction. Administrators are stuck doing redundant manual data entry, and worse, orphaned accounts get left behind, creating significant security risks. Failing to understand how to fix this, specifically failing to distinguish between where an identity is stored versus how it is provisioned, is also one of the most common reasons candidates struggle in SAP architecture interviews. To solve the dilemma, we must stop treating these systems as competitors. We need strict operational boundaries around Entra ID, IAS, and IPS, so they function as a single, automated machine. Think of these three tools as three entirely separate departments. They each have a strictly defined job, and they do not overlap. First is Microsoft Entra ID. For most organizations on Microsoft 365, this is the primary directory. It stores your employees, their passwords, their group memberships, and their department data. If we use an airport analogy, Entra ID is the passport office. Its core function is to establish and store your official identity. But while it holds the identity, it doesn't natively dictate specific access rights inside complex SAP applications without a middleman. That middleman for login is SAP IAS, or the Identity Authentication Service. IAS acts as the gatekeeper. Its sole responsibility is verifying credentials to enable single sign-on. In the analogy, IAS is airport security. It stops you at the gate and checks whether your credentials are valid before letting you through to SAP. However, IAS doesn't usually store the master user data. It has to continuously turn around and query Entra ID to confirm you are who you say you are. Finally, there is SAP IPS, the Identity Provisioning Service. This synchronization engine actively creates, updates, and removes user accounts across your target systems. In our matrix, IPS is the airline staff. They operate behind the scenes to make sure your ticket exists, your baggage is routed, and your seat is actually ready for you. Note the strict boundary here. IPS operates purely as a background logistics engine. It does not authenticate users. Deploying Entra as the directory, IAS as the guard, and IPS as the logistics engine prevents conflicting configurations and clarifies the enterprise architecture. Let's trace the actual data pathways to see how this works in a live SAP BTP environment, starting with the 6-step authentication flow. Step 1. A user opens an SAP app. Step 2. It redirects to the IAS gatekeeper. Step 3. IAS routes a request to Entra ID. Steps 4 and 5. Entra ID validates credentials and sends a token back. Step 6. IAS unlocks SAP BTP. The architectural distinction here is important. Entra ID performs the actual validation, but IAS manages the authentication session for the SAP application. Now let's look at the user provisioning flow. Imagine HR hires a new employee and creates their profile in Entra ID. Should the SAP administrator take that profile and manually key it into BTP, SuccessFactors, and Analytics Cloud? No. The IPS engine pulls the new profile from Entra ID and pushes it through concurrent pathways, provisioning the user into all required SAP systems at once. When an employee leaves, IPS detects the status change and automatically severs access across all SAP applications simultaneously. The practical benefit of wiring these flows together is single sign-on. Users authenticate once in the morning and move between all SAP tools without repeated password prompts. Mapping these technical paths takes work up front, but it trades that initial complexity for an automated user lifecycle and the convenience of single sign-on. Let's put all three systems into a definitive side-by-side comparison to clear up any remaining ambiguity about their features. First, authentication. Active checkmarks show IAS and Entra ID handle logins, while IPS is excluded. For user synchronization, roles flip. IPS is the sole engine for syncing users. Finally, storage. Entra ID is the primary enterprise source, while SAP tools act as synchronized relays. The blueprint is simple. HR creates the identity in Entra, IPS distributes that identity to SAP, and IAS gates the daily access. So when an interviewer asks you the exact difference between IAS and IPS, you have the answer. IAS handles authentication and single sign-on, while IPS handles provisioning and synchronization. If they ask if IPS can authenticate users, you can firmly state, no, IPS only manages provisioning. If they ask if IAS can use Entra ID, the answer is yes. IAS is specifically designed to trust Entra ID as the corporate identity provider. And finally, if they ask why Entra ID isn't enough on its own, you explain that SAP applications require specific groups and role assignments that only IPS can properly map and provision. The next necessary step is understanding how those specific roles function once the user is inside the system, which brings us to BTP user management and role collections. By treating Entra ID as the primary source, IAS as the gatekeeper, and IPS as the automated distributor, architects establish a predictable system for user access that simplifies the way people work and reduces the risk of manual errors.
Don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon.